Perpetuities. With a perpetuity, the cash flow stream is indefinite, meaning that they do not have a maturity. Now there's two scenarios we're going to look at for a perpetuity. In the first scenario, the cash flows grow at a constant rate. So if you look at a visual, here's what the cash flows would look like, and you could see that they're growing at a constant rate over time. Now, you may be thinking, what kind of instrument exhibits this kind of cash flow pattern? Well, if you look at a common stock, stocks do not have maturities. And at the same time, if you look at the corporate earnings over time, they tend to exhibit a constant growth rate. So this here is a really good depiction as to what the earnings would be on common shares. Now, when we do see something that's exhibiting this kind of pattern, this is the framework that we use in order to calculate its present value. Because as analysts, we need to see, or we need to determine how much this cash flow stream is worth today. So if that's the case, if we see constant growth running into indefinite periods, we just need to know the amount of the first cash flow, and then we divide it by R minus G, where R would be the required rate of return, and G would be that constant growth rate over time. So let's look at an example in order to apply this framework. Suppose that ABC stock is expected to pay a dividend of 58 cents at the end of this year, after which it's expected to grow at a rate of 6% per annum indefinitely. And as we discussed previously, stocks definitely exhibit this kind of pattern where the growth is growing at a constant rate and it's indefinite, meaning there's no maturity. Now the return that we require is 10%. So here we go. We're going to calculate the fair or intrinsic value for this stock. Now to calculate the value for any security, we simply need to know what the present value of their future cash flows is. As I demonstrated here, if this represents the cash flow stream, to find the value today, we need to take the present value of these cash flows and find out what the total amount of that present value stream is at that point in time. So because it's exhibiting a constant growth pattern, we use this constant growth framework right there. And the first cash flow is 58 cents. This was given to us right here, 58 cents at the end of this first year. And then we divide it by the required rate of return minus the growth rate, which is 6%. So therefore, the value we get for the stock is $14.50. So let me just work backwards here, or sum this up for you. For a cash flow stream that grows at a constant rate forever, and with the first cash flow being 58 cents, this entire stream today would be worth that $14.50. In the second scenario of a perpetuity, we have cash flows that are simply constant over time. In other words, they don't exhibit any growth. So this is what the profile would look like. So here's the cash flow. You can see that the cash flow is the same each year. And again, what makes this a form of perpetuity is that there is no maturity. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the same framework that we used in the first scenario and just tweak it. The only tweak we have to do is the adjustment that the growth rate in this case is 0. So where we see the G, we simply just set it equal to 0, which means mathematically it just disappears from the framework. At the same time, you can see that the subscript here is no longer relevant, because if the cash flows are the same each year, it doesn't matter if we're looking at the first cash flow or the cash flow 100 years from now. They're all going to be the same. So therefore, the framework we use in this constant cash flow scenario is right here. But I don't want you to see this as a second framework. I just want you to see this as a modified version of the initial framework that we used. This way, instead of having to grapple with two different frameworks, you just really have to know that one framework really well. So let's look at an example. Now, in real life, the instrument that exhibits this kind of cash flow pattern are preferred stocks or preferred shares. And the reasoning is as follows. The fact that it's a stock means it has no maturity, which is why these cash flows continue forever. But at the same time, the fact that it's preferred, with preferred stock, usually the dividends are fixed. So in this case, we have a preferred stock that pays a constant amount of 90 cents per year, and the required rate of return is 8%. So here's our framework where the cash flows are constant and there's no growth. We simply plug in the cash flow, which is 90 cents, and we divide it by the required rate of return, which is 8%. So therefore, the value of this preferred stock would be $11.25.